Hi, I'm Caroline Leavitt. I'm the I'm the co-founder of Mighty Blaze, which began when the pandemic did. It began because I didn't want my tour to be canceled, which it was, along with everybody else's tour, and also I didn't want bookstores to be shuttered, which they were, and I wanted readers to be able to connect with writers. So we are going strong. So I just want to say that if you have comments or anything, put them in the chat. And I'm really thrilled today because we have a close personal friend of mine who I love more than anything, Sara DiVello, with this book that I love more than anything, Broadway Butterfly. And this is really exciting for a whole lot of reasons. So I have to tell you that a million years ago, before I really knew Sara, she wrote this book called Where in the Am I? And it was about a woman in corporate life who transitions into yoga and more spiritual. And of course, I wanted to read it. Back then, this was before Mighty Blaze, before the Nothing is Canceled book tour that I started. Before anything, I had a blog that was called Caroline Leavittville, and I called Sara on and we talked, and I thought, oh my God, I really like this person. This person like could be a friend of mine. And lo and behold, we met again during a Mighty Blaze, and I just, we instantly clicked. So the exciting thing about this book, Broadway Butterfly, is that I feel that I knew Sara almost at like some of the inception of it, because I can remember Sara talking about, I'm working so hard on this book, and what if anybody doesn't want it? And I would say, of course I would. It's a brilliant book, which it was, and it is. And I remember when it was sold at freaking auction. And I remember now, like, she's on Good Morning America, she's everywhere. And it's just, there's something so wonderful about seeing someone you love and someone whose book you love succeed so extraordinarily. So anyway, Sara DiVello is the founder of the Mystery and Thriller Maven Facebook group and the creator and the host of the Mystery and Thriller Mavers Authors Interview. Big deal. She's also the director of social media strategy, huge deal, for the International Thriller Writers Association. She has appeared on CBS, ABC, CNBC, and recently Good Day New York in like this fabulous yellow shirt that matched the decor. She's been in the New York Times, Forbes, San Francisco Chronicle, many more. Her articles have been in Marie Claire, Elle, Cosmo, more. She's the author of What I Said, We're in the Am I, which is a hilarious memoir of moving from the corporate world to a more peaceful place. So Broadway Butterfly, her most recent latest, is based on an astonishing true crime, the real-life murder of a Broadway it girl, which has been unsolved until now. But it's about so much more, and it has so many great characters. In 1923, the Roaring Twenties, Daily News crime reporter, a real person, Julia Hauptman, was chasing a story of the murder of a scandalous flapper, Dot King, found dead with a fortune of jewels missing, with chloroform in her hand. It's about corruption, scandal. It captivated the whole city. There's a cast of characters that is astonishing. I'm not the only one who thinks this book is great. Broadway Butterfly was selected as an Entertainment Weekly Best Books of Summer, most anticipated, one of 2023's hot summer novels by AARP, a starred book list, rave reviews. It's just an amazing book. So I want to tell everybody, bookshop.org, wherever books are sold, buy this. Absolutely. You have to buy this. It's just absolutely extraordinary. So I want to thank and welcome the brilliant author and my bestest of friends, Sara DiVello. Welcome, Sara. Thank you for being here.
Oh my God, Caroline, you are just so amazing. I'm actually like trying not to cry because I don't want to smear my mascara, but you're so wonderful. And thank you for all of the incredible words of praise and kindness. And, it just is so
No, I'm going to cry.
amazing, because I remember when Where in the Om came out, and my publicist called me and she said, oh my God, Sara, Caroline Leavitt wants to have you on her blog. This is a huge get. And I was like, oh my God, Caroline Leavitt, because you were just so amazing. And I was reading your book at the time, and Caroline is known as a writer's writer. And not only is she a New York Times bestselling writer of her own book, but she's also a books reviewer for the crown jewels of the media world. And everywhere from the Boston Globe to People Magazine. I mean, you're just so amazing, Caroline. And to be able to be in conversation with you, an author whose career and whose body of work I so deeply admire and respect and appreciate. And also, you're the kindest, most beautiful human being ever. I mean, I'm just so freaking honored and thrilled to be here. So
we're thrilled to have you here. And there's so much to talk. There's so much to talk about in this book. So the first thing I want to know is, I always want to know this. I know the answer to this, but people out there will not know. There's an amazing story about how you came to write this book. It's got mystery in it. It's got mysticism in it. It's got, what was haunting you into writing this book? Tell the story, because it's amazing.
Oh my gosh. So I was home in Philadelphia for Thanksgiving, as I am every year. And, the day after Thanksgiving, there's not a lot to do if you're not going to the Black Friday sales, which my family and I do not, because, we're not insane. And so we're sitting around having our leftover mashed potatoes and stuffing and all the good stuff. And conversation starts to turn to reminiscing. And so my aunts and uncles and cousins, were visiting from far and wide. We're all chatting about family memories and whatever. And somehow my Uncle Ed, who was visiting from DC, starts to say that back in the day when he and my Uncle David were at LaSalle High School, they used to, after class back in the 60s, they used to sneak over to the old Stotesbury estate and sneak cigarettes and beer. And so my first thought was like, oh my God, the 60s sound fun. Take me back there. But then my second thought was, wait, what estate? And so I asked him about it, and he said, well, it's demolished now, which is considered the greatest architectural loss in American history. But at the time, there used to be this grand estate, in the days of Golden Age homes, Golden Age mansions and castles. Well, needless to say, I needed to know more, because DiVello loves a castle. I mean, if there's a castle, I'm going to go see it. So all 11 of us pile in the cars and we drive over, we caravan over. And there, in the middle of the next suburban development between the split level ranches and the Subarus and the tulip beds, are the ruins of an actual grand estate. So there's 50-foot tall pillars, going up into the sky toward nothing. There is headless statues of Diana and Zeus. And there's a standing belvedere, that is attached to nothing. And there's the remnants of a fountain that used to gurgle there. I mean, it was so cognitively dissonant to have the Subarus, the tulip beds, somebody's tricycle, somebody's big wheels for their kids. And then these ruins, like we're in Athens or Rome. I mean, it just was so bizarre. So I had to start researching it, because it just was so strange. And so I learned everything there was to know about this once grand estate. It had 147 rooms.
Oh my God.
28 bathrooms, 24 fireplaces, a gymnasium, a ballroom, a radio station, a movie theater. I mean, these are in the days when movies have just been invented. It just was so...
That's incredible.
It was incredible. And so I had to, I was fascinated, but I was like, that was great, but I'm not going to write the history of a castle, even though that would be a great book. So I put it aside. I went back to the novel that I was working on, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. And then 3 months later, right around Valentine's Day, in February 2014, I went back to it and I found an old book from the 1950s that referenced, the 100 most scandalous things to ever rock the Quaker City, to ever rock Philadelphia. There was the actual that said that this once grand estate had been remotely connected to a murder in New York City. And I had to tell that story. So I went down the rabbit hole, and 9 years later, here we are.
9 years. How did you sustain yourself through 9 years?
Oh my gosh. Well, Caroline, it's so funny because at the time, and this is only the ignorance of the naive, the woefully naive, I thought it would take me about a year.
Oh my
And
God.
let's all have a good laugh at that. It's outrageous to think that kind of research in this kind of book could be done that quickly. And my Aunt Joan, who was, there at the inception point and went with me to the castle, said, Sarah, I think this could take longer, like 10 years. And I was like, shut up, Aunt Joan.
Wow.
Who asked you? Idiot. Well, it turns out I'm the idiot. And she, my brilliant, wonderful, beloved Aunt Joan, was right, as she always is, because 9 years later, here's Broadway Butterfly. But
Unbelievable.
it did take me that whole 9 years.
So I want to also know that, as you were writing this and looking for agents and publishing and all this stuff, and you were so nervous and anxious, and now it seems like you're the pinnacle of success and everyone's talking about the book and everyone's buying the book. How do you feel? What does success mean to you? What does it mean to you? Because I bet there's something mystical in there.
Ooh, that is such an interesting question, Caroline. Because first of all, I think I don't feel successful yet.
That's interesting.
I don't feel successful yet. I still feel like I'm in the trenches. I'm still, I've been working on this book for every single day of my life for almost a decade. I started in my mid-30s. Now I'm 46, and I then immediately, there was no rest for the wicked. I immediately went into marketing the book. So I started ramping up into, doing the publicity, which I had done PR and marketing in the corporate world for 10 years. So dusted off that hat, dusted off those skills, got back in the trenches. There was no break in between. And so I think I'm just like, okay, what next? The book's only been out for 2 weeks. And so
it's doing phenomenal. It's doing phenomenal. Yeah, I think it's an interesting question for writers. Like, when will you feel successful? I mean,
that is such a good question. That is such a good question for writers, because I think, I watched this fascinating TEDx talk by this Harvard professor and psychologist. Sorry, he's not a Harvard professor. He's a Harvard graduate who's a psychologist, and he studies the science of happiness, Sean Aker. And he did this TEDx talk that went viral. And he talks about how, as humans, the reason we're not happy is because we keep moving the goalpost back for success and for happiness. So he said, he applied for Harvard on a lark. He never thought he'd get in, and he got in and thought he thought, my God, if I ever get into Harvard, I'll be so happy. But then he got in and thought, oh my God, well, now I have to do well. I have to get all A's. And then if I get all A's, I'll be happy. But then he got all A's and said, well, now I've got to get all A's next semester. And then he got all A's next semester. And he said, well, now I've got to graduate, number one in my class. So we keep moving the goalpost of success and the goalpost of happiness back. And that actually prevents us from being happy. So to answer your question, I think number one, I feel like I'm, my butterfly has just emerged from her chrysalis. She's just fluttered out of her chrysalis and is taking flight. She's fluttering off the page and into the world. And I just want to support her launch. And I think
you are.
Oh, thank you, Caroline. I think, my goal in writing this book was to honor these real life people and their extraordinary lives and their extraordinary careers, because, I see these biographies come out about Princess Diana or Barack Obama, and it's like an unauthorized biography, and I think to myself, oh my God, what if someone wrote, a book about any one of us? I'd be like, hey, don't rush. Like, take your time.
Yeah, I
know. Do not rush to write that and get it out, because get the entirety of a human being.
Get the whole story. Right.
The whole story. Encompass the entirety of our complex, complicated, beautiful humanity. And I wanted to capture that in each of these 4 real life people. So, Julia Hartman, who's my lead character.
Let's talk about Julia. I want to talk about these extraordinary characters. First, tell us about Julia, then we'll move on to Dot.
Okay. So I tell the story through 4 points of view, but I really think this is Julia Hartman's story. She's my lead character. This is her book. If I'm speaking from my heart, it's really hers. So Julia Hartman is a Jewish girl from Memphis, Tennessee. Did not know that they had Jews in Memphis, Tennessee in the
No,
1920s.
I didn't.
I did not know. And her father was a German Jewish immigrant who was escaping the pogroms and rampant anti-Semitism of Germany in the at the turn of the century. So he moves to the US, he immigrates to the US, he and his brother, and he meets Julia's mother, good Jewish girl. They get married and they have their children and they raise them in Memphis, Tennessee. He and his brother are tobacco brokers. So they are running a very, successful business because everyone back then smokes. No one worries about cancer.
Oh, no, not back then.
No. So Julia's raised with a certain level of privilege with, money and access. But what's really interesting about Julia is that her mother was a writer, which was unheard of for a woman in the 1800s. And after she would put her kids to bed, she would write her novels. And then after the last kid was self-sustaining, she went to work at her local newspaper writing the society pages, the ladies' pages, which was
Tell us about that. Right.
fashion, who's dating who's marrying who, what they're wearing, the parties they're having, right? And so Julia's mother is setting an example for her of what is possible for women that very few other women are doing. And that is a unique and beautiful part of Jewish culture. And I think that empowered Julia to see herself as being able to go into the workforce in a way that a lot of other women didn't feel. So Julia joins the society pages under her mother's tutelage and guidance. She works there for a little while. Then she moves to Knoxville, Tennessee. She cuts her teeth on the court beat there. And then she's like, you know what? I'm going to test my mettle in the Big Apple. And she packs her little bag, 1 suitcase, $60 in cash, and she borrows a fur coat to look fancy, look citified. And she heads north to get a job in New York City. And she becomes one of the pioneering women of journalism, one of the 6 pioneering women of journalism at the turn of the century. And yet this woman has been completely forgotten by time. This woman is someone whose career should be taught in every journalism classroom in America, in every history of journalism class, in every journalism class, period. And yet nobody knows her name. And I hope that in some small way, this book will bring to light this extraordinary woman, her extraordinary career, and that allow her to take her rightful place in history because she has so richly earned that.
Does she have descendants? And have you been in touch with them?
So interestingly, she does not have descendants.
Wow.
And let me tell you why. Because she married another newspaperman.
Right.
Everyone called themselves newspapermen, regardless of gender back then, because most newspapermen were in fact men.
Right.
In the way that we say policeman, fireman. Now, we say firefighter, or lose the gender part of it. But back then, that's how it was. And she keeps her maiden name. She keeps writing under her maiden name. She keeps her career, and they become this incredible newspaper power couple. And they don't have children. And I think that's really interesting. Oh my gosh. Hi, Lara Tupper. I know Lara. She's coming. Hi, Lara.
Lara also once says, I can't wait to read it. Loved your first book. Me too. And she wants to ask, how does yoga influence your writing practice? So answer that, and then we're going to go back to the characters because there's so much more I want to know.
Okay, perfect. So I know Lara from Kripalu, which is the largest
yoga I know that. Yeah.
In North America. And Lara's also an incredible writer in her own right. So we share, and we did we attended a writing retreat together 11 years ago. So Lara and I share both yoga and writing and Kripalu. So hi, Lara. I'm so happy to see you. Okay, so yoga influences my writing in several very specific ways. So first of all, I am really open about the fact that I suffer from anxiety. I've always struggled with anxiety. And thank you, Caroline. And I really appreciate your transparency. I was just mentioning that to someone yesterday. I find that publishing is a perilous and anxiety inducing and often rocky road. And yoga gives me the tools to stay calmer and to stay grounded and to navigate that uncertain, perilous path to publication. Because if I allowed myself to get caught up in that anxiety fully, that would distract me from the work. And I'm not saying I'm immune to it, but I'm saying that the tools of yoga, which is to ground myself, ground my feet to the floor, close my eyes, and take 3 deep, calming breaths, and to calm my mind in a way, in some, important way, allows me to release my attachment to the outcome and be present in the work.
Right.
I believe that a calm mind is a creative mind, and the tools of yoga give me the ability to move away from that anxiety and to be present in the work and to be creative in a calmer mind.
That's lovely. I love that. I love that. So let's go back to this astonishing cast of characters.
Okay.
Tell us about Dot, Scandalous Dot.
Scandalous Dot. Okay, so Scandalous Dot is the murder victim. So she, and that's not a spoiler, this whole book is about her murder. So she is a 29-year-old scandalous flapper who tells everyone she's 27, which I just kind of love. Because
I know, it's hilarious.
It's so young, but you can see that anxiety about turning 30 back then.
Right.
And so she is the daughter of Irish immigrants. So both parents immigrated from Ireland, and her dad is a night watchman at Wanamaker's, which is a department store like Macy's or Clover or Kohl's.
Right.
Her mother is a laundress. So she works at a laundry, scrubbing, washing clothes. And her mother eventually works her way up to owning her own laundry, which, again, unheard of at this particular time. For a woman to own a business, very rare. So I like that each of these women is influenced by the very rare, unique women who poured into them, who raised them, who modeled life for them. So Dot comes from a very, very humble background. So she grew up on the Upper West Side of New York City in Manhattan, and her parents rent an apartment, so they don't own. So there's some instability there. They move around a lot. They move apartments. And so there is some housing insecurity. There's some financial insecurity. You're not making much if you're a night watchman at Wanamaker's. You're not making much if you're a laundress. And she's one of 4 children. She has 2 brothers and her sister, Helen. And she comes from, this very, very working class background. She gets married on her 17th birthday. And I just think that that's really interesting too, because as a writer, have to hone in on specific moments that capture that person. And you can picture a 16-year-old girl, very young and hopeful and a little immature, saying, just wouldn't it be so romantic if I got married on my 17th birthday? And of course, as a 46-year-old woman, I can say, you're too young.
But not then. Not for then.
Not then. Not surprising, or at least not surprising to me, the marriage does not work out. So she leaves him. She moves back home. Her father has just died. And because we live in a very patriarchal society at that time, and still, her brother takes over as the head of the household, and her brother is running a very tight ship. So he does not like how she's conducting herself. Women were not allowed to cut their hair back then. Literally not allowed to cut her hair. But in the 1920s, women started cutting their hair as an act of rebellion and as an act of bodily autonomy. And so she cuts her hair short and she starts wearing shorter skirts. And I'm not talking mini skirts here. I'm talking like to the knee or right below the knee, but they're not to the floor. And she dyes her hair blonde, which is her brother's
my God.
You filthy tramp. So they get into an argument about it. And she says, I'm going to do what I want. And he hits her and he throws her out of the house. So at the age of 24, around 24, she finds herself out on the streets of New York, and she has to figure out how she's going to survive. She has to figure out how she's going to make a living, where she's going to live, how she's going to pay rent, how she's going to live. And so she moves in with a female friend who says, you can stay with me for a couple months and you have to pay rent. So she's got to figure this out. So she happens to be extraordinarily beautiful. She's known as the most beautiful woman in New York City. And she gets a job as a professional model. And she starts making a good living. But Dot was very ambitious. And so she eventually she's having lunch with her female friend, and she catches the interest of a married man who offers to become her patron, her sugar daddy.
Tell us about that word, sugar daddy.
That word, Caroline, that word is only in our vocabulary today because of Dot King. She was the world's first sugar baby. Well, she wasn't the world's first sugar baby, but she was the first person we used that term about. And he was a sugar daddy. Now, that was only a term used in the very chic, very happening Broadway section of Manhattan, where all the fabulous people were flocking. But because of this case, and everyone starts talking about it, and it seizes all the headlines across the world, all of a sudden that very specific Broadway term all of a sudden enters the national and soon international conversation, and has remained in our vocabulary for 100 years.
That's incredible. That's incredible. So cool? It's a really, really cool thing. It's a really cool thing.
I have a picture of her. Let me grab it.
Oh, great. I was going to tell people to go to your website because you have other photographs there.
I do. So SaraDiVello.com/behind the scenes. I have all sorts of pictures. I should have had the pictures ready, Caroline. I could have done a show and tell. I could actually grab them. I'll grab them really quickly. Oh my gosh.
What is it? What is it? Sara DiVello behind the scenes?
SaraDiVello.com/behind the scenes.
Okay, got it. Behind.
I'll show you guys some pictures of this extraordinary woman. So,
photos.
Yeah. So we got to. We're doing this very spontaneously, but here she is.
Oh my God.
Here she is with one of her several lovers, and this is actually one of the two suspects in the case. She was involved with this guy who was a Broadway gigolo, and he becomes one of the suspects in her murder, which is, I think, really interesting. Now, here she is. I want to show you this because this woman is just so extraordinarily beautiful.
Oh my God.
Isn't she gorgeous?
She's amazing. She's amazing.
Here she is. And she just, look at her sassy pout.
I know, I was going to say, and her eyes are like, don't mess with me eyes.
Her eyes are totally done. This is a woman who knows her worth.
She knows her worth. Yeah. Oh my God. I wish I had her earrings.
Oh my God, totally.
I know. Look at her. She's gorgeous. She's gorgeous.
She's so gorgeous. And here she is with her future husband, Westbrook Pegler, who is also a newspaper reporter who goes on to win the Pulitzer for journalism. And this is her editor, Philip Payne, who was the managing editor of the New York Daily News, which is the newspaper.
Wow.
And here they are, just, she's hanging out in a snowstorm.
That's incredible. That's just incredible. Okay, I want to ask about Ella Bradford.
Oh my gosh.
Go ahead, tell us.
So Ella Bradford was Dot King's closest friend, her confidant, and the keeper of all her secrets. And here is a picture of Ella Bradford.
Wow. Oh, she's beautiful. She's so modern looking. Beautiful?
So this is 2 weeks before she was murdered, before Dot was murdered.
Dot was murdered.
And Ella is dressed in her Easter best because it's right around Easter. And Ella Bradford is amazing. So she is one of the 7 million Black Americans who, in the wake of the Civil War and the racism and segregation of Jim Crow laws, heads north and east to Chicago, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, and New York to create a better life for herself. So at the age of 20 years old, she gets on a train. First of all, she's from Jacksonville, Florida. So Jacksonville is segregated at that time. So Ella Bradford sat in the quote unquote colored waiting room to get on the quote unquote colored train, to sit on that train for 3 days, sitting up. There's no beds on the quote unquote colored car, to go to New York, which was not segregated, and create a better life for herself. And her courage and her self-possession and her incredible bravery. I mean, what an extraordinary woman. She deserves to be honored for
Yeah,
her rightful place in history as well.
absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, I want you to tell us about not giving anything away. Oh, wait, let's look at this picture first. Tell me who this is. Oh,
Julia's
jeez.
roommate, Hilda Ferguson,
Oh my God,
who,
she's gorgeous.
so she was also known as one of the most beautiful women in New York, and she goes on to be a Ziegfeld Follies girl. And only the prettiest girls are Follies girls. So Hilda Ferguson goes on to become a Follies girl, and I actually have a picture of her in her costume, and
Oh
here she
my
is
God.
again. This is Hilda.
Look at that face. Oh,
Yes,
she's just gorgeous. Just gorgeous.
very glamorous flappers. I just want you to, oh, yeah. So these are, I mean, they're just so pretty. You can't kind of believe that they are real people, and yet they are.
And yet they are. And yet they are.
And yet they are. So,
And you made them breathe on the page.
oh, Caroline, thank
You
you.
did. You
Thank you
did.
so much.
Okay, so I wanted Booklist said that you've given no spoilers, that you've given everybody enough information to actually solve this cold case. So I don't want to give away anything, but tell us about the four suspects.
Okay, so Dot King was a woman who lived life on her own terms. So she had multiple lovers, Caroline. She
Right.
was not
Right.
going to limit herself to one lover, one husband. She was going to live life on her own terms. She was a sexually liberated woman. And she was involved primarily with two men. So the first was the Broadway gigolo that we just looked at. And the other was her sugar daddy, who was parading around New York under a fake name. And then she also had other lovers that she would just take at her pleasure, at her leisure and her pleasure. And she just decided to live life on her own terms. And I love that about her.
She's a strong woman, a really strong woman. Did it surprise you? I mean, what was it like when you reached the point where you thought, oh my God, I know who did it? And is there anything to be done about that now in terms of cold cases and stuff?
So, Caroline, I got really stuck and I hired a psychic because I was like,
I love this story.
Detective DiVello is going to report for duty and is going to solve the case. And I am going to hire a psychic who works with law enforcement on cold cases. And she ended up giving me a clue that caused me a year of rewriting, but that's okay because I want to get the story right. And I actually know where she's buried. So
You do? Did you tell the police?
I have not told the police yet because I don't know if they would care about a 100-year-old cold case. But Caroline, I have been tempted to grab a shovel and a flashlight and drive up there and dig her up myself.
Where is it? Where is this? Did you go there and feel? I bet she would like send, energy to you or whatever.
Oh my God, I didn't even think of that. I think it's illegal to dig up bodies. I think maybe I can't do that, but I have thought about it. And because I think because the thing is that DNA should actually last 100 years.
That's right. That's right.
So if we go under that assumption, she should have DNA on her corpse,
That's
on her
right.
skeleton that could link it to finding a suspect if we're to proving a suspect if we're also able to get DNA samples from the descendants of the suspects, which I think
are there descendants of the suspects still alive? Oh my God. Have they said anything to you?
No, I have not contacted them. I was in touch with one of the family members of one of the descendants of one of the suspects, but I didn't tell her what I was doing because I thought, how would I feel if someone came along and said, my grandfather was a murder suspect? It wouldn't bother me because I'm interested in things like that and I have
Right.
to go about family. How would you feel, Caroline, if someone came and said that to you?
It wouldn't surprise me given my family. I would be curious. I would want to know. It's kind of, I wouldn't want to know if they were serial killer, if they were like Ted Bundy or infamous Nazi or something. But I think it's hard to stop that curiosity. We want to know who we were and what our past was and how it shaped who we are now.
Yes. Yes. So exactly, like you like me want to know, but I think
Yeah.
some people are very
Some
precious
people don't. Right.
about.
Right.
Some people don't. Some people want to live, you know, in the words of Strawberry Fields, the Beatles song, with their eyes, closed.
Yep.
Life is,
Yep.
what is it? Life is easy when you're living with life is easy when you're living with your eyes closed. I think is one of the lines from Strawberry Fields. And some people don't want to know. And I wasn't sure if this particular family was going to be precious about their
Right.
family history or not.
Right. That's it. Why did you decide to write this as fiction, as a novel, instead of not a novel? I mean, I love it that it's fiction, and I know why you did, but tell us why.
So in my mind, for the past 9 years, I wrote this as true crime. In my mind, every single day that I worked on this, I said to myself, and to anyone else who would listen, including you, Caroline Leavitt, including you, hey, this is true crime. This is a true story. But what I realized, 9 years in, is that I was not going to be able to get everything. So for instance, all the dialogue that I could pull from direct quotes, I did. All of the facts that I could pull are in there. And yet, even despite my levels of anxiety and OCD, 9 years of working on this, I can tell you some things just can't be gotten, no
Right.
matter
That's right.
how OCD you are. And I'm pretty
Right.
OCD. So conversations in interrogation rooms behind closed doors, between husbands and wife,
Right.
between suspect and police captive, between police commissioner and head detective, between politicians. These conversations cannot be gotten because they were not recorded and those people are dead. So I can't ask them. And so I found myself having, in spite of very rigorous, extremely careful research, at the end of 9 years, I found myself not being able to get certain things. And so in order to fill in the rest of the scene, I had to call it fiction because I didn't have the other half of the scene or the other half of the conversation.
Well, it's incredible. It's actually more immersive as fiction because when we read fiction, we become the character, we go inside them. And I mean, that's one thing that I absolutely loved about the book. I loved, the whole story world of the bootleggers I didn't realize that Nucky Johnson was on the Boardwalk Empire. I just went, oh my God, I love that show. I mean, you got every single detail, so colorful and so right. I just want to show this book again, Broadway Butterfly. It's amazing. It's totally, totally amazing. I have one last question for you, Sarah, which I ask everyone. And guess why? Because it's a question I ask myself every day. What's obsessing you now and why?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I am obsessed in terms of the news or just everything.
Everything. Okay. It can be anything. It can be the right kind of peanut butter. It can be whatever.
Ooh. Okay. So obviously I'm obsessed with food because I love to cook and I love to eat. So that just, that's just baseline.
Right.
That's just average. I'm obsessed with the news because I think we live in pretty crazy times and I'm
terrifying
wondering what
times.
Next. Terrifying times. I remain obsessed with great books, and I cannot wait for Days of Wonder to come out in spring 2024. I was so thrilled to see that hit number 53 in pre-orders, and I expect that number to only continue to soar. That cover is stunning, and the Pie Lady books
Thank you.
Did a gorgeous cover reveal.
Thank you.
I'm also loving The Leftover Woman by Jean Kwok.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. And Jean is so wonderful. Totally fabulous writer and fabulous human being.
And I loved the blurb that she provided for Days of Wonder because it totally nailed.
She's just a wonderful writer. My main thing is that writers supporting other writers is really important, because every time you do that, you keep promoting literature and you keep promoting people buying books and supporting books. That's why it's so important to buy books. Don't always wait for the library. Don't wait for somebody to buy another copy. Writers survive on people buying their books, and if you keep continuing their books, they can keep publishing, because publishers watch all that stuff. So please do that, and every time you do, an angel gets a new halo. It's
Oh my
true.
God, I love it.
It's true. So before we go, I want to tell everybody just what I said. Please go out and buy Sarah's book, buy Jean Kwok's book, pre-order my book, pre-order all the Writers You Love books, buy all their books. It helps the community, it helps writers, it helps readers, it helps everybody, especially angels. I want to thank everybody for being here, and I especially want to thank Sara DiVello, first of all, because, oh my God, her book is incredible, and I got to watch it sort of grow and take flight. It's major butterfly status, and also because she's such a wonderful person, and she's just so close to my heart, and that makes doing these interviews even more special than anything. So thank you, Sara, so much.
Caroline, thank you.
Sarah, you stay on. Okay. Everybody else, we will see you next time. Go buy books.
Thanks, Lara. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you.